Hey everyone, today I'm going to be talking about the 10 key roles and responsibilities for a non-executive director and or a trustee as well. And we had some great training by the great Andrew Chamberlain, who focuses on non-profit, non-executive directorship and leadership, has a wealth of experience around governance and all the key things that are required to be a great non-executive director, NED, or trustee. The difference between the two is that one is more set up for business, so to speak, and the other is more set up for non-profits and or memberships. But again, they interlink. It really does depend on the culture and the leadership setup of that organization as well. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using my notes to, again, keep me on track. Again, I'm not going to be copying his stuff verbatim because that's not fair. If you want to check out more about him and what he does, you want to go to LinkedIn, type in Andrew Chamberlain, and he's also got a company called Elevated, which does some great work for nonprofits as well, especially if you're in the governance or non-executive director space. So let's get into the first bit. The first point that he was making was that essentially it's very important to make sure that although you are cognizant of your members or the people you're serving, you're not representing them. Okay, the business is the focus, and essentially the way you need to see it is that you are on par or in some ways the employer to the CEO and their executive management team, so to speak. And so this is a big responsibility. I know there are a lot of people, especially millennials and a lot of these Gen Zs, who are collecting, NED and trustee roles like badges and everything else. But the reality is that essentially you are a director. Okay, obviously you're on company house and you have key accountabilities that the government will look to you for in terms of making sure that the business or the charity or the membership board or whatever is delivering on its promise, on its strategy. So of course you have the members at mind, but you're not necessarily just doing it purely for that. If you think about surveys and everything else, you may ask surveys and ask all these questions and you'll get all these great insights and everything else. And when you deliver it, nothing happens. This is the same effect. Okay, so you need to remember that sometimes asking direct questions isn't how it goes. Sometimes you just need to listen and see what they say, so to speak. But the business is the focus. The business. That's the key point there. Second thing is really focus on the higher level points of thinking. So this is thinking about the mission, the values, the vision, all of these big, high pie in the sky things. So when we think about values are the things that you deem as important. I say this because people call me Mr. Values. It's true. If you understand your values, then you understand how you make decisions, and those decisions determine your destination. Your destination determines your destiny, so to speak. And so the values can fall out of the strategy or can inform the strategy. It really depends how you go about it. Okay, so there are going to be times where in your sessions with your counterparts and everyone else, you're in a position where you're able to extract and develop some of these key points. Now, you're not always going to be in a position where you're developing a mission, a vision, and values, because sometimes those points have passed. It may happen possibly not annually, but maybe every 4 years or every 5 years, and maybe your term is only for 3 years or 2 years. Okay, so it really does depend on when you come into the cycle, but you can check these points to see if we're on track, if we're on par, which leads me on to the next point. Strategic planning. Okay, what do I mean by this, or what does he mean by this? Well, strategy, this is the way I've understood it in terms of my change management training, is that it's the approach that you take. So it's the way you do something. It's how you're going to do something. You're not necessarily getting into the operational weeds and detail and everything else. And so how you're formulating this has to be on a high level. What's actually done on a very minute level is for the ops team or the actual business to deal with. It's not for you to deal with as an NED or a trustee or whatever it may be. And so when thinking about strategy, think about the approach. How are they going to go about it in alignment to the mission, the vision, the values, all those different key things? Think about the essence of the business, so to speak. Okay, and so this is something we need to think about. Strategy is heavily embedded in the vision. Okay, the vision being where you would like things to be in 50 years time, 100 years time, 200 years time, 10 years time, whatever it may be. The mission being what is critical for us to do day to day, so to speak, in order to make this happen? What is the end goal, so to speak? And the values, like I said before, are the things that you deem important. So strategy is very, very important. I believe if you don't have those things in place first, your foundations, which may feel quite ethereal by nature and sort of pie in the sky or whatever it may be, then it's very hard to do the operations, and it's very hard to do the planning, the action planning, because again, you don't know what's giving you that direction. You don't know the theme of the direction. You don't know what footsteps to take, so to speak, or what steps to take. So that's another thing to bear in mind. Another thing is focusing on budget management, so to speak. And there's so many different forms of language that you can use for this, but this is looking at, do we have the money to deliver on X? Okay. What does capacity generally look like to deliver on this? Okay. So do we have the staff? Do we have people in place? Do we have the right expertise, so to speak? Where are we sourcing the money from? Is it from these accounts or those accounts? That sort of high level detail, but not thorough detail, again, is very important, because this is on you guys, And again, if you've never been an NED before, a trustee before, then maybe this is important for you when you go into interview and everything else. How can you relay this information based on the experiences that you've had that you can portray into your interview in these sessions? Okay, so think from a budgetary standpoint, and also think about how do you manage certain aspects of it. So the fifth thing in my notes is really thinking about, how is your board put together? Okay, so thinking about diversity and strength. I remember doing a talk at Capco. It was to the, I want to say basically a black community. I was trying to be all political with it, but it was the black group. Okay, it was to some black people, and we're talking about diversity. And in my talk, I was talking about how there has been a lot of evidence that has showed that diversity increases strength because of the various different skills and expertise and knowledge and backgrounds and languages and approaches that are thrown in the mix when tackling a problem. And so really and truly is thinking about, how can you get to a point of creating the right type of board for the outcome? It can't just be an echo chamber where you're hearing your own voice because it's just black people, it's just white people, it's just Asian people, or it's just people who are small, or just people who are tall, or just people who went to this area or lived in that area, or just people who did this form of education, or just, there needs to be a bit of diversity to reflect that strength in numbers, and not for diversity's sake. Does that make sense? Because if you're just doing it for diversity's sake, you could still have people who do not contribute positively towards what it is that you're aiming to do. And so this is where you have healthy discussion about when the next terms come up in terms of, okay, how do we set up the application process? When it comes to deciding, if need be, succession planning for a new CEO or whatever it may be, how are we thinking about that? Or what does that approach look like? How are we making sure that members within sort of like the board are upskilled, or there is some level of CPD, continuous professional development? Is there some level of work shadowing or coaching or one-to-ones that are set up, whatever it may be? Because not everyone's going to be at the right level. Don't think that they have to have years of experience as a director, whatever it may be. That's not necessarily the case. Of course, don't get me wrong, there is bias towards that, but that isn't necessarily the case. And I truly believe if I can do it, and you can check my LinkedIn if you want to see my experience and all that kind of stuff there, then you can do it. You can kind of work things out. The other thing is making sure that we stick to the right bylaws, or what are known as policies and procedures. We stick to the right level of compliance. We're just basically sticking to a standard, doing things properly. And it is your responsibility as a non-executive director or trustee to stick to the script, okay? You may not know everything. A lot of it is common sense, but maybe just having a read of some documentation. Your organization will have the key documents based on what they say is required. It will be highlighted in the roles and responsibilities. It will be highlighted on documents that you search online. It will be highlighted on the gov.uk website when it comes to I think it's the Charities Act and the Companies Act as well, okay? 2006 and 2011. I don't know if it's respectively, but it's one of them. You can check these things up and you can read upon this stuff. There's also different things that were commissioned back in the day to understand what a director slash non-executive director comprises of. So think about policies, procedures, all of that kind of stuff there. How can I be, in the confinements of this stuff? Because ultimately you are liable, whether you agree with certain things or not, you are liable if you're in that position. The next thing is also making sure there is the right level of financial and operational oversight. And oversight is the key word. You can't go into deep insight. That may end up being a thing. And we had this discussion where it feels like you're undermining your ops team, okay, your executive management team, your CEO, and if they have a deputy or whatever it may be. It isn't fair. And I made this point yesterday that, like, it was profound because Andrew and the rest of the team were giving me insights that maybe I didn't necessarily appreciate before, as this being my first NED position. And I basically said, it's all about trust at the end of the day. And the word trust is in trustee. So that is at the epitome of everything that is being done. And so you need to trust that they are going to deliver on what they're doing, and they need to trust that you're giving the right level of assurances. And it's contingent upon the right level of governance to ensure that, again, those mechanisms, those principles are in place. That is fundamental. So think about that stuff. And by the way, this does not replace great training that Andrew Chamberlain is doing and will do in the future. So I would 100% check out his stuff. It is phenomenal. This is only a snippet of what we discussed. There's also risk management, okay? So this is making sure you have the right gateway controls and right things in place and mechanisms and escalations to ensure that risk is being managed properly. So of course there needs to be some sort of RAID management. So that's risks, assumptions, I think it's issues and dependencies, or decisions, depending on what you decide, okay? And that needs to be tracked. There has to be documentation that manages the risk, okay, and records certain things. There needs to be, again, certain gateways that allow and do not allow certain things to happen. So I think what was being sort of like hit home yesterday was that everything needs to be recorded. Everything needs to be recorded, okay? Don't underassume anything. So it's important for the person taking the minutes to take really good minutes. And the detail can be described in terms of what's expected. For anyone who's taking risks, they take those risks. For anyone who's looking at the finances, they manage that part as well. So risk management is essential. The following thing is looking at stakeholder engagement. And rather than calling it management, I think engagement is a bit richer in terms of the approach, because there isn't always an expectation, but it's always good if board members can engage with partners, suppliers, people laterally or vertically or whatever it may be, because again, this is in the best interest of the business or the charity. You're trying to raise their profile. You're trying to, as he stated before, promote their success, so to speak. And so with that in mind, it's in your best interest to make sure that you engage in the best way possible. So if there are people within your area of expertise or industry, this is an opportunity for you to, again, connect the dots, see if there is opportunities that can be arisen from a win-to-win sort of like standpoint. These are all things to bear in mind. And finally, is to note that, sometimes when it comes to the CEO, deputy CEO, whoever it may be, they may sort of like portray that things are okay, and they may not, but support them as well. The scrutiny bit is for the best interest of the business, but also you don't have to do anything, but it's nice to show the right level of support. It just is. Encourage, empower your CEO to follow through the plans, make the right decisions, support them if there's any sort of like soundboarding that's required, or expertise or advice, mentorship, or just thinking in general. This support is hugely welcomed by a lot of CEOs, hoping that the culture and everything else is in a good space. So hopefully this gives you an idea. Maybe you're not a NED, maybe you're not a trustee, and maybe this is just giving you an idea. When you type in non-executive director in YouTube, You either get Americans who are talking about this stuff, or you get older individuals who are typically, giving you their version of it. And none of it is wrong. But I think I give a unique perspective because I'm young, I'm black, I'm within the UK. It's that simple. There are many other people typing this stuff out. So you can check out LinkedIn for those sorts of people typically, or you can check out Google. But again, I thought, let me do a video on this as well. There are other individuals as well who are posting stuff more increasingly, I believe, within the UK. Younger people as well, around the 20, 30-year-old age mark, which is really positive to see. We like to see that sort of stuff. But I don't think I've seen many people like me. So that's always a nice thing in that aspect. So hopefully you can relate to this if you identify with me in some way, shape, or form. It's not always about color, my friend. Anywho, if you want to see more videos like this, let me know. If there are any other topics that you'd like for me to discuss, leave a comment below. Anyway, if you want to see more topics around portfolio careers, positive psychology, and also life management, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.